Yeah, you could be a little bit louder, but
Okay,
I hear you fine.
okay. Uh, Thanks again for squeezing me in tonight. My thesis proposal is for an artifact-based project. I want to build off of work I did at the start of the IDT 553 class, the Principles and Projects, namely a dashboard application, although the final project in that class ended up being something very different than this. Some quick background. I work in the legal department of a software company, part of a small litigation management team. Our chief counsel needs a way to track the status and activity of our litigation matters across the globe. He is looking for a way to stay on top of data such as cost estimates, case status, upcoming key dates, risk assessments, accrual needs, and so forth. Dashboards have become quite popular at work, though there are off-the-shelf products. Some of the material is considered too sensitive, and they prefer to have homegrown control over it. We also live by the mantra of faster, better, cheaper. So we lean towards trying to solve problems in-house. Now, in this case, the problem of gathering the data involved has already been solved in that all the data are collected in a somewhat automated fashion and reside in only a few locations. The issue is making sense of that data and to do that quickly. So the question is, can a focus on user-centered design be used to solve this problem by constructing a meaningful dashboard application and do so quickly without using extensive resources? Will it be faster, better, cheaper than, say, a top-down technological approach or a more traditional design approach? The theory involved here, I think, is human-centered design. What the project is really an attempt to find that sweet spot between what the business needs, what the technology affords, and what the users actually want to use. This will also pull in other aspects that I've learned over my IDT education, such as application of Gestalt principles and Nielsen's heuristics for interface design. Now I can put that into practice through the application of user-centered design, a variation of which we in the software industry have, we call agile development. They're very similar. It's, rather than the traditional waterfall development where the process flows in one direction, usually from the designer to the end user, agile or user-centered design, as the user is part of the process from the beginning. The entire process is actually built around continuous feedback from their experience using the application. Their needs and perspectives are the driving force in what becomes an iterative, repeating process. While this type of development should yield a more useful, valued product in the end, its biggest benefit is the increased speed with which a product can be put into practice to the benefit of the end users. In terms of methodology, Agile or user-centered design uses a contextual design methodology, although with less of a focus on documentation, more of an emphasis on speed, and more of a sense that the design is never really finished per se. It starts with talking to end users, trying to identify what really matters to them, quickly building a prototype, something that delivers the biggest bang for the buck, something that meets their needs best with what's readily available. Then having them test, explore, and critique what comes from that, bringing further changes and possible new use cases for that tech solution, which leads to further exploration of what they're looking for, further changes and suggestions, further testing and using the solution, and so on. Now, several studies I've come across suggest semi-structured interviews to start with, to look for common themes of what the end users are interested in. Using that, I've already identified in my small group 3 key requirements for the project based on their feedback. It has to be web-based, which would make the dashboard more agnostic in terms of devices and platforms. It has to be interactive in that they'd like to dive a little deeper if needed into a specific matter or country. They may want to do what-if scenarios, for instance. And finally, it cannot require updating on their part. They want the most current information available as soon as they go into the application. And of course, it has to be faster, better, cheaper than the status quo. I'm interested in this project because I think it sums up the IDT experience. It's all about presenting information in a way that fosters an efficient and effective understanding of it, and doing that through the use of technology. I do have some questions. I don't have a primary advisor or a second reader. We welcome any suggestions you have. And I need to follow up and learn more about the need for an IRB review or a way around that.
Joe, did what courses, were there any courses that helped you, sort of directed you in coming up with this concept?
I think Professor Stam, I took her the projects course, the 553 that I mentioned. I also took an organizational change course, which has helped me understand a lot about the way my company functions or dysfunctions.
You know who taught that class?
I think it was Catherine Stam as well.
Oh, okay.
So I'm thinking if she's available, she'd be a great primary.
And could you back up? I mean, what exactly are you looking at as a product from this?
Well,
out of it?
It would be a dashboard. Let me see if I have the, hold on one second. Let me see if I can bring up the one I did. All right. This is a very different dashboard, but this is the one from that 553 course.
Okay.
It involves some of the same people that I'm working with now. And although this would be very different, the one that I'm talking about, they have changed. They don't like the speedometer effect, for instance, and things like that. But the idea is essentially the same. It would be a site that they could go to, see the information, have some things where they could change criteria, and then see things adjust accordingly. In this case, they were looking for top matters where they might be able to pick specific departments and things like that, and have, just by going to one site, be able to, in an interactive fashion, find out more information of what they want to discover. This one was
Sure. So it's sort of like drilling down into the data.
Right.
And what their real meaning is. Gotcha. Revised budget. Okay.
Yeah, this was for that course, and it sort of reflected a couple key budget considerations they have every year.
Did you design this?
Yeah.
I mean, why not just use this? It's great.
Build off of this?
Yeah. I mean, it shows all those issues you discussed in the other, listings that you had, the design, user. Part of this too, it sort of gets back to the idea of creating a mock-up and not even testing it with users just yet, because that's where you start getting into IRB.
Okay.
But if you can just sort of think of those issues and then show a potential site that you would run by those people, and start asking them for feedback. Also, those, could you jump back to those other slides?
Sure.
I had a question. Did you create these slides, or did you get these from somewhere? I'm not.
Well, I created the slides, but the graphics come from whatever the source is listed underneath.
Oh, okay. You create. I got you. Yeah. And the other one as well. The other reason I ask is these are great sort of visualization tools of how to understand how to complete these sorts of things. But you got them from elsewhere, which is perfectly okay because you designed a site based on these ideas. So this becomes your what you would. I'm trying to see redesign people's work. Now, do you feel like you applied these methodologies in creating that site, or do you think you would have to now take this site and run through this methodology to see if it's optimized?
I would have to run through this again. The last one was much more of a traditional top-down approach.
Okay, great. So what I would suggest, and you should definitely talk to Dr. Stam about this. This is perfect for her because you've already done it in her class and she understands where you were going with this. But I would just go through this in terms of what comes next. In other words, you're coming up with a mock-up that you just showed in terms of the budget stuff, and then you would go through what would come next. And you go through both of these slides in terms of how it would evolve or could evolve based on going through the contextual design methodology, talking about usability, but not actually doing it, not at least at this stage for this project.
Okay.
And so I would put the focus on the prototype and what goes into that, how you came up with it, even though it's just a prototype and it's just a pilot and it hasn't been tested. And then just explain how it would be tested. At least that's my thought. You can see what Dr. Stam says, because well, you could have a couple of experts look at it. I think that would be easy to get approved, especially if they're currently experts already. So you wouldn't have a real problem with the idea of talking with them. But I'm not so sure that that's even important. I think what's important now is designing a prototype and what goes into that.
Okay.
So back up one, I just want to see the last slide. Yeah, the user-centered design, Agile. So you would go through the building, the configuring. The only thing you wouldn't do is the test. If we're looking on that right side.
Right.
And you wouldn't release it, at least to the world, you'd sort of just go through the design, build, and configure. And you'd explain that the next two parts are testing it and then actually releasing it once it's been tested.
And
So,
go through that methodology on what those tests would be or how that would work.
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. What does that mean? And that's what your next slide sort of goes into. So this is sort of, understanding the users, going through, actually doing a user-centered design. Hopefully, you may be wrong, but you're not worried about that yet. This is just showing that you're concerned about those issues and what it means to be user-centered. That's what sort of human-centered is all about, is it's user-centered. That's exactly what human-centered is. That's why, they use the word human rather than non-human or whatever. It's what humans want. So it's centered around them. And if your objective is to be engaging and malleable and responsive, blah, 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 you're not going to know it for sure until you do the next thing, but you're not going to worry about that yet. You're just coming up with a prototype based on these concepts. And this is what our program's all about, quite honestly. We've done a million of these. We create prototypes based on theory, and we don't even worry. We don't really teach survey. Well, we may, I'm not sure, but I don't believe we do a lot in those areas. But we do a lot in the front end, less in the back end. And so you're applying, universal principles of design, using good colors, using the appropriate, typeface and type size, and those sorts of things. So you're creating the best possible prototype. And so is, Bianca and her online course, and, we're basically in Lindsay in creating this sort of these courses or these forms. So it's sort of this whole thing is based around applying your skills that you've learned right up to that point where you would test them. And that's where that's where your thesis ends, and where you go from there. Even when the student designed the piece for the firefighting, he didn't actually test it with firefighters. He went right up to that point, and then he was done as far as the thesis was concerned. I happen to know for a fact he actually went out and used it with firefighters, but we didn't worry about that. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you're pretty close, and I always it's sort of like I was saying to Bianca about just go back to the class she took and you're almost done. I mean, just think about that. You've done this already. You did this in Dr. Stam's class. You set this up. Now you're going to sort of formalize it, clean it up maybe a little, maybe think about every aspect of human-centered design and write about that, each one. So is it informative? Is it collaborative? Is it responsive? Is it malleable? And if it's not, it's not. That's okay. I mean, you were just doing things with that budget that made it malleable to me. You could choose different numbers. You can choose different situations or scenarios or not, and if it doesn't, you write that up, that's all. You say, these are areas for future development. Some of it you might want to do now if you feel you want to improve those areas, and some you may just put in as future needs. You've got a lot there. Boy, that looked really good. So I wouldn't
Thank you.
go worry about doing a lot more, actually. You're in pretty good shape. Just do your analysis.
So
Lindsay?
I have a quick question for Joe, and I do actually have a suggestion for him. So I don't know if there's a way of getting like a free version of this video, but my work has a subscription to a site called UIE. Stands for I can't remember, usability, user interface engineering or something like that. It's pretty awesome, and I actually watched one of the video presentations. It's 90 minutes long. It was on designing dashboards, and it's called Designing Dashboards, the Do's, Don'ts, and Does, like Homer Simpson dough. And it's by this woman who goes through and she shows a whole bunch of dashboards, the before and after, that she as a UX consultant has been a part of. And I think that might actually be really, really helpful for you, especially because, and this kind of leads into my question, you don't really explain which parts of user-centered design you're going to be using. I think, I don't know if maybe the image, the graph there led you to believe that that's a process, but like to me, user-centered design is like an encompassing topic. It's not a process like agile development is. So I would think that you'd want to include processes like persona creation or archetype creation for building your dashboard. Understanding that different types of employees are interested in different information in their dashboard. So a sales rep is going to be interested in certain types of information that a manager is not going to be interested in, or that a CEO is not going to be interested in. So that may help you design your dashboard. And I know she goes over that in this video. I can give you the name of it and maybe you can find it, but I do know you need to pay for a subscription to UIE to watch it on UIE. And the name of the woman is Hagen Rivers, and I tried to look her up, and she just has a website really of her consulting firm. But I think it might be really helpful for you to just review and maybe spark some ideas about which methods in user-centered design and like a user-centered design development process you might want to use. Like which pieces do you want to assemble together to make your whole design cycle? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, thanks for the tip. I will definitely check that out. Some of the studies I've been reading recently have gone into personas and the idea, kind of like archetyping, as you said, with organizations much larger than the one I'm in. But I definitely want to follow up on that. Thank you.
If you have anything specific, Lindsay,
Yeah, you're welcome.
type it into the chat line there, in terms of him sort of finding
Yeah,
what you're referencing. Oh, no. If you have any,
I can send you the link, but I don't think you'll be able to look at it. I think it'll be a useless URL. So I'll put the name of the presentation in and the woman that is like the presenter, and hopefully that can help you.
Okay, thank you.
I just sent a link in the message for Adobe Educational Exchange. They have tons of free instructional videos on designing. And sometimes you can find teachers on there that'll help you.
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks, James. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Always helpful. Yeah, I think this is great, and I think you're, running it through the testing phase, I think isn't necessary, and I think will inevitably sort of slow things down, because what's going to happen, because I've seen this, is you would submit it to IRB, and then they would say, wow, we got a bunch of questions for you, so that'll delay it another month. They probably won't meet again until March, I'm sure, so then you'd have to meet again in April. So it would just, you're just not going to get it done. And I don't even know what they'd end up doing, if they'd approve it. I think they would, but it would just take so long. And I think you're okay with what you've got right here.
Okay.
So you can talk with Dr. Stam. Maybe, she'll have some ideas as well. I think she'd be a good person for this. Dr. Lazzardi might have some thoughts too. I think he taught web design at one point. I'm not sure about that, but he's good on theory in general. And might have some good ideas. But start with Dr. Stam. See what, explain it to her and see what she thinks in terms of a second reader.
Okay.
Because if you start there, then she'll have a good sense of where her gaps are, where you could help. I'm sure it has to do with actually designing a website. That's where she may need some help. And Anna Joffrey teaches web design, but she may be a little overworked. You might want to go with someone else, even Dr. Schneider, because he does that sort of thing. Okay, I think